Hello and welcome to Firearm Freedom. This is going to be another movie guns video. Before we get this movie guns video started, as always, there are links down in the description where you can support everything that I do here on the Firearm Freedom channel. One of the best ways to do that right now is to click that first link to the Firearm Freedom merchandise store. I have some incredible t-shirts over there that I am very proud of. I am sporting one in today's video. It is Lizards Run the World, Watch the Eyes, and that is just an awesome shirt because it doesn't jump right out in your face, but it's still cool to wear, and when people read it, they have a laugh. If you want to make sure you're not being censored out of existence here on YouTube, be sure to comment underneath this video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. All of those things should make sure that these videos show up in your feed. This is a very fun series that I started a little bit ago. We started the first video in this series with The Purge, and it was kind of just the weird guns of The Purge. I don't want to continue to call it Weird Movie Guns because there are going to be movies in this series that we go over that just have awesome guns, and there's nothing weird about it. It's just going over all the cool guns that they have. This is going to be an interesting one because we are going over Escape from New York, and there are going to be a lot of very weird guns that we're going over. If you did not see the first video in this series, I'll post the card up in the corner of the screen now. For the majority of these videos, we're going to be looking over the IMFDB website, and that is a really cool website. It's essentially like Wikipedia, but it just showcases every single gun that's in a movie and also what gun it is. They're fairly accurate most of the time. It allows us to see really nice photos of that gun. Sometimes they're overexposed, so that way you can actually see what it is. The list of guns for Escape from New York is actually relatively small, so we are going to do Escape from LA as well. If you're not familiar with these movies, there are probably going to be some spoiler alerts, but this movie, which aired in 1981, is probably one of the most cringy, bad 80s movies, but it has Kurt Russell and it's a classic. So if you haven't watched it, you should watch it, and then you can really geek out with me on this video. We're going to start off with a little bit of a doozy, and that is Kurt Russell, or in other words, Snake Plissken's gun throughout Escape from New York, which is, of course, the MAC-10. Now, if you're not familiar with the MAC-10, it's a submachine gun. It is chambered in 45 ACP, and it truly is a brick of a gun. I have a Velocity Firearms MAC-11 clone, essentially, and it is a pistol because of our stupid laws. The movie gun actually showcases a MAC-10 without the stock a few different times. You guys will be seeing photos of that come up. These guns are pretty interesting, but they are pretty unwieldy and frustrating to shoot. Now, the MAC-10 in full auto, I have shot that before quite a few times. It's pretty reasonable for a submachine gun. The MAC-11s, this one's chambered in 9mm, and there was also a 380 variation, are brutally difficult to try to keep rounds on target. The cyclet rate is insane. Now, the interesting thing about this particular gun, or the MAC-10 in the movie, is the fact that they have what appears to be a standard magnification scope. They don't say anywhere if it's a scout scope, which would, I guess, make a little bit more sense. I'm assuming that it's just a standard scope. As you can see in these photos, they have the scope mounted not on the gun itself somewhere with some crude mount. At least that would make slightly more sense. They have it mounted on the suppressor. Yes, you're seeing that right. It's on the suppressor because it's an 80s movie, and that's just where, you know, we think it looks coolest because it's futuristic and, you know, it is what it is. The next one is just one of the guns that he has on the table that he's picking up, and it's just a Smith & Wesson Model 67. Standard revolver. They were in a lot of 80s movies. Of course, this one has a ginormous, funky-looking scope on it. Surprisingly, there are a lot of people that run scopes on hunting revolvers, and they work pretty well, so I could see that, okay, as being somewhat realistic, sure. I get it. Another Smith & Wesson revolver, which is the Model 10 snub nose. This is just a basic revolver you're going to see in a lot of different movies. I'm going to spend less time on the normal guns that you would expect, and I'm going to spend more time on just the crazy ones. Because next, we have, by far, the best gun in the movie, and that is the M16 SP1 that they have. Now, they have two different variations of this in the movie. They're both slab side uppers, and those uppers are incredibly collectible now, but it's a very early generation upper receiver on an M16. That's not the weird part of this. So, at some point throughout this, the director, in his infinite wisdom, was like, these chunky heat shields, they don't look good on these rifles. So we're going to take them off. Throughout this, the soldiers in this, the like stupid looking soldiers with it almost looks like Spaceballs. They look that bad. And they have no handguards on the rifle. They are just holding the barrel. There's no heat shield, and from the looks of it, there's no gas tube. It is just an interesting thing that just is probably my favorite gun in Escape from New York, because it is just so stupid. And I used to watch this movie when I was a kid, and I never paid attention to that. And watching it as an adult, especially as a gun person, I looked at the movie and I'm like, no way, there's no handguard on that. And sure enough, there was not. Now, they do touch on a few various guns here. This is the cool thing about IMFDB, is the fact they show you everything, and they just display flintlock guns because there's some flintlocks in a glass case behind on one of the scenes there. And then they also show some crossbows. There's like some futuristic Mad Max style crossbows, and that's going to be it. That wraps up the guns from Escape from New York. Now, when we're getting into the sequel of this wonderful series, it's going to be Escape from LA. And now Snake Plissken gets dropped off on a life or death mission to survive escaping LA. Now, don't worry, it's a futuristic LA, and I love everything about it. So we're going to go ahead and briefly go through some of the guns in Escape from LA. We're going to start off, okay, with this very, very interesting M16K variation. Now, they're calling this the La France Specialties M16K, and quite frankly, this is the first time I think I've ever seen this configuration of an OG M16 style ever. I'm not familiar with this carbine at all. I would imagine it's a pretty interesting carbine and be a cool one to clone. And in the movie, they took this M16K and they have so much stuff on it. It's insane. You can barely see the base rifle in this, but it's there, I would imagine. So they have just what looks to be a pistol grip and this super weird guard going around it. They have what appears to be like a maglite body on the bottom that maybe they're trying to play off like some sort of radar or grenade launcher. They have this funky looking stock in the back. Then they have this crazy scope on it, and the body is built out everywhere. And of course, it's on the table with some badass 80s throwing stars and throwing knives, because you gotta have it. And then they also cut the muzzle device off, and they made a more rounded handguard, and it is called the Core Burner in the film. And it's a blank firing gun, so they had to make it somewhat work. It does fire in a few scenes in the movie, and of course, as we could expect, there's absolutely no sight picture to be had, and they're all fired with one hand. A Ruger AC556. If you're not familiar with the AC556, it is essentially the full auto version of the Mini 14. I'm actually pretty proud of my Mini 14. I absolutely love this rifle. We'll have a video of it on the channel. It has the Samson AC556 stock on it. So this is a very traditional stock that you generally see on 80s variations of the AC556. You're going to notice in the photos here that compared to the Mini 14, it's a little different. The AC556s typically have the front sight moved back, and it also acts as a bayonet lug, and it just has this funky chote stock on it throughout the movie, and in my opinion, the stock looks just terrible. I don't know why they didn't have this awesome metal side-folding AC556 stock, because it just looks so much better. Next, we're looking at an FN FAL. This is just a sick battle rifle, and in this case, it's actually mounted with a 37 mil launcher, and it's a Cobra CM203 launcher, because why not have a flare launcher? And that's seen throughout multiple configurations of the FAL, which is cool. Next up, we also have featured an HK93A2 variation. You can see it's featured with the A2 stock. I have a Century C93 here that has been an awesome rifle. I absolutely love this rifle, but it is almost an identical clone, except this one has the collapsible stock, and quite frankly, this stock is not very comfortable at all. I am going to be putting the A2 stock back on this. This collapsible is going on another project in the collection, but of course they showcase this multiple times, and it is just an awesome 80s movie rifle. We gotta have a standard AKM. Now this is the closest thing that I have as a representation to an AKM to show you guys, which is my PSA Romy build kit, and this one also has the dong. And they show this throughout a few different parts of the movie and a few different variations of the AK. We also have this section that says unknown AK variants, but they're just showcasing a Galil. And we also have some M16 variations, of course, with the Mad Max style biker gang that's all throughout what is now LA. Somewhere in the background of this photo, we also have the wonderful M1 Garand. I love this because there's just so many random ass rifles in this movie. We have a 1903 Springfield in that same scene. Through, they say, various parts, the H&K G3. Now, I have actually the same model that's pictured on IMFDB, but mine has the wide handguard, and this is, of course, a PTR 91. Now, I don't remember seeing a G3 at all throughout the movie, but apparently there was one. Allegedly, a K98 throughout the movie, but once again, I do not remember seeing this rifle at all throughout the movie, but I do love the K98, and it is a cool one to feature in a movie. The Mini 14 featured a few different times, and this is actually the bone stock Ranch Mini 14, which my Mini 14 that I showed you guys earlier started in that configuration. We get into some pretty ridiculous handguns, starting with the Smith & Wesson Model 629 Performance Center. This is a beefy revolver, and it looks like they have a very early aim point on there, which is just pretty freaking cool. Of course, Kurt Russell dual wields them in akimbo style drop leg holsters, because why not? Now, of course, the Surgeon General, okay, in the weird plastic surgery lab has a standard, what I would imagine is a Colt 1911A1. Now, they don't specifically say Colt here, but it's a movie. It's in the 90s. I would imagine it's a Colt. In this case, we have a Cimarron 1911 here, but I have almost identical grips to the one that's pictured in the movie, and you gotta love a good old 1911. We also have the Desert Eagle, which is used by none other than Steve Buscemi throughout the movie, and it's just a classic. We also have a Ruger P90. I swear to God, all 80s and 90s movies featured the Ruger P90, and it is the chunkiest gun ever. But surprisingly, the P90s are actually pretty freaking good handguns. They are built like tanks, and they generally work really well, and they're really reliable. And you used to be able to find them for cheap. It does seem like they're starting to dry up now, but I remember seeing a bunch of them come through at like $250 through a few of the gun shops that I worked at. I wish I would have picked one up because they are just kind of a cool 80s and 90s gun. Next up, we got a real weird one, the Seacamp LWS. Now, this is a very small 32 ACP pistol. I actually did get a chance, thanks to a good friend of mine, to actually handle this handgun in person. It's real tiny. It's just kind of a cool one that was generally seen in the 90s as like a small compact carry pistol. Of course, we also have to include the HK MP5. Right now, my PTR 9CT is floating around here somewhere. I just dropped a video on that that is not too favorable, so quite frankly, I don't really care to showcase that PTR 9CT in this video. We also have an HK SP89. Now, this is a kind of unique version of the MP5K. What you're going to see here is a vertical grip. Because of our stupid laws, if you actually had this gun as a standard person in the country, it would be an AOW or any other weapon, and it is also going to have the distinct feature of not having a protruding barrel out the front of the gun. So you're going to see just a flush section. It's not able to have a suppressor mounted or anything like that. It's actually kind of a cool little PDW. You see it a ton ton in 80s movies. And then it also showcases just a standard MP5K as well, and that is going to be about the same. We also have the HK94A3. This is a really interesting gun because it has a funky looking civilian 16-inch barrel. This was due to funky importation stuff and other things in the country. So they're always in 80s movies. I never understood why, but they are in there. We have a micro Uzi because why not? Fun fact, the cyclet rate on those micro Uzis is just insane. We got a few like little kids and gang members shooting them in this movie. We of course also have a MAC-10, or in my case a MAC-11 once again in this movie. We also have the Cobra Street Sweeper. That is just such a terrible shotgun. I've handled a few of these in person, and they're horrible. The cylinder rotates all weird, and it is well known as being a very uncomfortable gun to shoot, and it became just very collectible, and a lot of people wanted them for whatever reason. We also have a SPAS 12, and that of course is an awesome shotgun. We have a Remington 870 Witness Protection. This is probably one of my favorite SBSs out there. It just has such a cool look to me, and although I cannot stand Remington when they were going bankrupt there at the end, I really am kind of bummed out I never got one of their TAC 14s in the wood because it was identical to the Witness Protection. And even though it probably would not have worked, it still would have been cool to have that gun. We have an all-purpose net gun because why not? And that, I don't know, maybe that would be cool to have. And finally, we have an M136AT4, which is going to be a pretty standard anti-tank rocket launcher. And, you know, why not have that in an 80s movie? But that is going to wrap up this movie guns video. I love doing these. It's a Friday. They're a lot of fun to do for me because it's just kind of going over a cool movie. If you guys have any other questions about anything in this video or you want to see another movie, please throw them down below in the comment section. I hope you enjoy this video. While you're down there, head up to that description and check out those links where you can support my channel. And as always, stay tuned for more great videos coming soon.